Who do you buy among the quarterbacks? It's Kyler Murray. I still am an advocate for buying him because I think that he is a top 10 upside quarterback. People that didn't really watch the game today would kind of, be concerned about this. But to be honest, I'm not concerned about this performance from Kyler Murray, and I think that he's a great buy candidate moving forward.
Dortch again lines up in the backfield. Murray near side to Harrison. Over the shoulder. Touchdown. Coming up on the 4-minute mark in the third quarter. Murray running that read option. Murray stutter stepping in. Touchdown. And they are putting it on the Jets.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Fantasy Football 201. Today's video, we're going to look ahead to Week 11. We're going to talk guys to pick up on waivers, drop candidates, buy low, and sell high heading into Week 11. So hopefully everybody listened to my recommendation to buy Kyler Murray from this past week, as you saw in the intro video. And this week, we're going to be looking at guys to pick up heading into the final stretch of the fantasy football season. We've got the trade deadline coming up soon, so we're going to look ahead. Later this week, there's going to be a more in-depth video on the guys that you want to buy and sell based on the playoffs, but I'm going to be looking at waivers and trade candidates based on performances over the past few weeks to keep in mind heading into Week 11. If you like this content, please drop a comment below, subscribe to the channel. I reply to all my commenters on this channel, so please take advantage of that with this small channel. Ask any questions you have, and I will answer it to help you win a fantasy football championship this season. All right, so before we talk about each position as we've done throughout the season, guys that you want to add, drop, buy, or sell at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and we'll talk defense and kicker. We're going to talk bye weeks. So our buy or buy segment for this week will feature the Arizona Cardinals, Carolina Panthers, New York Giants, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All of these teams are heading into a Week 11 bye. So first we're going to talk guys that you want to buy as in trade for, or buy as if you can safely drop them to the waivers for their Week 11 bye. So we'll start with Arizona. Obviously, you probably missed your window to buy Kyler Murray on his bye week, but if you still can, I would recommend doing so because, as I said, he's a top 10 quarterback rest of season. I would definitely trust him. He's going to have some down games, but overall, I think that he is going to be pretty safely in the top 10 rest of season. James Conner, if you can buy him, I would recommend doing so. He's got a great schedule rest of season among the running backs, and because of that, I think he would be a great candidate to pick up and trade for if somebody does not want to hold them through their bye week. Marvin Harrison Jr., same thing. I think he's going to continue to dominate the targets. He's the leading wide receiver by far in terms of the target share. He's going to have some down performances from time to time, but I think of all the guys that are outside of the top 15, he has the best chance to jump into it based on the experience that he's gaining in the NFL. And in this bye week, they could scheme up some more plays for him. So I really like Marvin Harrison, and they get the Rams in that fantasy championship week, which has been hemorrhaging points to wide receivers this past week, and they've just lost Tre'Davious White. So consider all that with the Marvin Harrison Jr. schedule. Guys that you want to say bye to. The two running backs I think you could say goodbye to, unless you already own James Conner, then you can hold Trey Benson, but Emari Demercado is a pretty easy bye for me on their bye week. And all the other wide receivers, Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, etc., they're bye-byes on their bye week too. Trey McBride is a bye. Much like Marvin Harrison, he is a guy that is heavily involved in this offense, and I think if you can buy low on him heading into this bye week, I can. So pretty common theme with these Arizona Cardinals who are playing very well. And even this defense, which I'm going to talk more later in the video, has a very intriguing schedule rest of season. So if you have space to hold them, it may not be a bad idea too if you have been streaming the Arizona defense this past few weeks. Consider them in the playoffs because they could be very relevant for you. And then kickers, Chad Ryland, as well as kickers for all these teams, can be safely dropped on their bye weeks. We move to Carolina. Bryce Young, if you had been rostering him, you could say bye-bye to him. Even in 2 quarterback leagues, I think he's safe to send to the waivers. Running backs, Chuba Hubbard, I will talk more about him later in this video, but I think he is a good sell candidate based on his schedule that he has the rest of the season. So just consider that as well. But you got to be getting good return for him, which I'll talk on in a little bit. Jonathan Brooks could be a buy candidate, though, because his value is really tanked based on Chuba Hubbard's new contract. Just his inability to play this season. People may be impatient with him, and I think if you can buy low on him before the trade deadline, I would recommend doing so. He could be a breakout candidate, may not be anything, but I would be willing to take a cursory look at him and see how this develops. Wide receivers, I would be buying Xavier Legette. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but he has a great strength of schedule heading into the playoff and rest of season schedule after their bye weeks. So he's somebody that I would be trying to buy, and he's going to get the majority of target volume on this team too. And then the other guys, Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker, those guys can all be bye-bye. Send them to the waivers. Ja'Tavion Sanders is a bye-bye for me as well, but he did get a touchdown this week, and he's somebody I'm monitoring his target volume for rest of season because I think there's a good chance it could continue to increase. So I would send him to waivers, but I would be interested in adding him again after this bye week. The Giants, Daniel Jones, you're a bye-bye, man. I think there's a good chance that he may not even be the starter when he comes out of the bye, which that'd be crazy. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if they decide to give Drew Lock a look. So the running backs, Tyrone Tracy would be a buy candidate for me. He's got a great schedule rest of season, heavily involved in this backfield. And as this team is realizing that they're not competitive, I think they're going to continue to give Tracy more looks and see what they have for the future. Looks like they've got a running back that they could rely upon for the next couple years and a receiver. So they just got to get the quarterback right. I can see them continuing to use Tracy. And with a great schedule, he's a great buy candidate. And to me, Devin Singletary is a buy. You can get rid of him on the bye week and it won't hurt you. Wide receivers, Malik Nabers is a great buy candidate. People are freaking out about him because of how he's played since his concussion, but he did have 10 targets in this game, and with that target volume, he's going to turn things around eventually. They're going to figure out how to get him involved. He also has a great schedule at the wide receiver. The Giants really have a lot of nice matchups rest of the season, so all these players are good buy candidates if possible at the skill positions. Even Theo Johnson, the tight end, and in the very deepest of leagues he's rostered, but he has gotten 6 targets the past 2 weeks. So Theo Johnson is somebody to monitor too, because maybe he gets involved as a second or third wide receiver. It's Malik Nabers, Wan'Dale Robinson, but maybe they could start getting Theo Johnson involved too. So something to monitor there. Tampa Bay. To me, this is a good opportunity to buy Baker Mayfield if you can. He had a down week, but he is a top 10 quarterback rest of season, in my opinion. The number 2 right now. I don't think he stays at number 2, but I think that he's still somebody off a down week. Getting Mike Evans back soon, I would be trying to buy him. The running backs, though, is a little more complicated. They've really had their value ballooned the last few weeks because of the lack of wide receivers that are healthy and competent on their team. So they've had to rely a lot more on these 2 running backs. And to me, Rachaad White would be a sell because I just don't think that he has the value that you're not going to, the amount of value that you would have to give up to get Rachaad White would not be worth it. But Bucky Irving, to me, backup running back, has already gotten some good pass catching volume already this season. I would be more willing to buy Bucky Irving because it would cost you less. And I think there's a good chance that Irving is actually more successful as the pass catching back moving forward with this Tampa Bay team when Mike Evans gets healthy. So we go to Mike Evans now. He is a obvious buy candidate if you can get him. I think when he comes back, he's going to be getting 10 targets a game easily, and is a top 15 wide receiver rest of season for me. So obviously, hopefully he doesn't re-injure his hamstring, but if he comes back healthy in week 12, as he says he is, this is a potential sleeper for the playoffs. So if you can get Mike Evans, somebody may be impatient and not be in a position where they can continue to hold him. Try to buy Mike Evans now. The other wide receivers can all be dropped. Jalen McMillan, Sterling Shepard, etc. You don't need to hold those guys through the bye week. And then Cade Otton is a buy. To me, people may be panicking with him because he had a down week this week, was pretty uninvolved at the end of the game. Then he gets the bye week. Then Mike Evans is coming back. So people may be thinking, oh, we're just going back to a guy that is a waiver wire caliber tight end. I do not feel that way. One, he has a great schedule for tight ends. It's number 4 strength of schedule. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But then the other thing with Cade Otton is that with Chris Godwin being gone, to me, he's going to be the number 2 pass catching player on this team. And there's going to be a role for him there. So I see Cade Otton continuing to be involved. And to me, he's a top 10 tight end rest of the season. All right. So we will go to the quarterbacks now. We're going to talk guys to pick up on waivers, drop candidates at quarterback, buy and sell. And as I mentioned before, there's going to be a video coming out later this week, most likely on Wednesday, that's going to talk about more in-depth information on trades in preparation for the trade deadline. The sleeper trade deadline is coming up at the end of week 11, so I will talk more about that. ESPN leagues, as far as I'm aware, they go until the 27th, so that'll be something a little more for those leagues. It gives you a little more room to trade some guys, but particularly because a lot of leagues have their trade deadline ending this upcoming week, we're going to focus in on that in the middle of the week this week. So quarterback ads. First, check to see if Bo Nix is out there. He's 51% rostered, but he has been playing extremely well over the past few weeks. Has been a top 10 quarterback this season. And Bo Nix, to me, is somebody that is just going to continue to get better as he gets more comfortable in the NFL. He's been a very solid rookie. I would see if he's out there, and he's also got some solid matchups coming up on his schedule that I think that he would be somebody that you can continue to stream throughout the season. Make sure that he's out there if he's available in your league. Also check if Geno Smith is there. Geno Smith was likely dropped on his bye, but he does give you a pretty good fantasy floor, hanging right around that QB 12 range on the season. So if Geno Smith is out there, I think he's a solid pickup as well. Let me just double check real quick who he's playing for this week. But Geno Smith is somebody that I'm definitely interested in as a player that you could pick up on waivers and give you a solid floor at the quarterback position. They get San Francisco this week, which isn't necessarily ideal, but they do have some solid matchups later, like Minnesota, the Jets, that I think Geno Smith can still be relevant for you this season. But the number 1 ad for me at quarterback is Justin Herbert. And Justin Herbert has everything going well, trending in the right direction. The Chargers offense is getting more opened in terms of their passing offense is getting more involved. Herbert has had some great performances the past few weeks, particularly the last 3 weeks. Justin Herbert has had 24, 19, and 19 fantasy points against the Saints, Browns, and Titans. And next week they get the Cincinnati Bengals. So that is a great streaming option. He's 48% available in ESPN leagues. But then the next couple matchups are also really nice. They have Baltimore in week 12. Then they get Atlanta, which is not necessarily a intimidating defense. Got a tough matchup against Kansas City, but then a great matchup against Tampa Bay in the first game of the fantasy playoffs. And then Denver, New England at the end of the playoffs. Not ideal, but in that stretch between week 11 to 15, you've got some great matchups. So Justin Herbert could really be a guy to help carry you to the fantasy playoffs if he is out there. Love him as the number 1 quarterback pickup for this week. Russell Wilson is number 2. And this is another guy who's really turned things on over the last couple games. And, he didn't play at the beginning of the season, but and he's got a reputation that definitely hurts his value. But he has played very well. And Russell Wilson has another great schedule moving forward. He's got the Bengals twice, the Ravens twice, and the Browns twice, which are all pretty porous pass defenses. So all that being said, it's crazy that they haven't played anybody in the division so far. But Russell Wilson is playing well. He's got a nice matchup. Mike Williams being added to this team helps, and he's good at getting the ball down the field. And this Steelers offense really humming right now. Russell Wilson is a great option, especially in 2 quarterback leagues, to pick up if he's still out there and stream in a lot of these matchups rest of the season. He would be the number 2 ad if Justin Herbert is not available. Then guys in deeper leagues to look at that I'm not really as interested in, but are still intriguing. Jameis Winston coming off his bye gets New Orleans, which lost Marcus Lattimore. Played better this past week with the new coach, but still Jameis could give you good floor value. Derek Carr in that same matchup against Cleveland. Both these two are very inconsistent players, but I'm still interested in them as streaming options and seem to be giving you good floors from time to time in this strong matchups, which for both these guys in this game, I'm expecting a lot of points. And then bear with me on this one, but Will Levis has an excellent schedule. He had a good game today against the Chargers, which is a solid defense. So could Will Levis be one of those sneaky guys that with his fantasy playoff schedule actually leads you to a championship? And I'm not saying to go pick him up, but I'm just saying just this schedule is amazing here. He's got a few tough matchups these next few weeks. He's got Minnesota, Houston, Washington, which is an improving defense. But then the rest of the way, he's got Jacksonville week 14 right before the playoffs. Then he's got Cincinnati, which is a bad defense. He's got the Colts, which is not a good defense either. And he gets Jacksonville again in week 17. So those 4 weeks, the one right before the playoffs, and then week 15, 16, and 17, are incredible for Will Levis. So I'm just putting it out there that sometimes these guys, we may have some injuries. Will Levis could be a great streaming option in the fantasy playoffs if you can somehow figure out how to be less turnover prone. But still, just monitor this situation, especially Calvin Ridley, who's playing well. Titans could be real sleepers in this fantasy football playoffs this year. And then other names to just look out for. I'm not really interested in adding them, but they're going to be relevant, and we'll see how they do before I really feel comfortable rostering them, unless you're in the deepest of leagues and you need to get a quarterback. Bryce Young, probably going to be dropped on his bye week. Mac Jones, he could be the starter rest of the season if Trevor Lawrence is injured and not going to play. And then Trey Lance. All these guys are rough. Trey Lance could be the starter next week. But, I mean, just monitor these situations. I think it would be better to just put a position player in instead of these 3 quarterbacks. But, it's something to monitor. Drop candidates, and there's quite a few. Dak Prescott looks like he's going to be out for the year. Should be dropped. Aaron Rodgers, just highly inconsistent. I would be trying to trade him off the name value, but if you can't do that, you could safely drop him. Sam Darnold started the season off strong, but has really teetered off over the last few weeks. I think he's at the point now where you can drop him. Caleb Williams is really struggling, and as much as I would love to keep him for his upside long-term, in redraft leagues, he's really difficult to justify holding on to right now. Trevor Lawrence may be out for the season, but again, and I don't know how I feel about Mac Jones with this playoff schedule. They have another really nice fantasy playoff schedule in terms of defensive matchups. They get the Jets in week 15, which, keep in mind now the Jets are not a good defense. Then they get the Raiders, and then they get the Titans. So 3 juicy matchups for those 3 fantasy playoff weeks. So we'll see if Mac Jones is the quarterback, but if Trevor Lawrence is there, it actually is very interesting to me as a potential stream option. And then in the shallow leagues, this player I've talked about extensively in this segment, but CJ Stroud. Yeah, in redraft leagues, I think you really got to move on if you're a struggling team. And this is going to kind of lead into my buy segment. But if you can somehow trade CJ Stroud to a team that is 8-2 or better, that has a winning record, maybe they can afford to just put CJ Stroud on their bench and see what happens. Because CJ Stroud, the argument for him as a trade candidate is that he has the number 6 best strength of schedule rest of season at the quarterback position. And they play Dallas this week, which is generally a great get-right game for struggling offenses because Dallas is terrible this season. So you can make that argument, but for a team that has CJ Stroud, they probably don't have a winning record if they've relied on him all season. So at this point in the year, you probably just want to move on and get a piece that can help you more consistently through the season. It's probably not CJ Stroud, but he's a great buy candidate among the teams that are winning and can afford to put him on their bench. So of all weeks that you can buy this player, my number one would be Jaden Daniels. He struggled the last few weeks, also not been fully healthy, but he's had some tough matchups. They get the Eagles this week, which is not by any means an easy matchup either, but I'm suspecting that this will be a game in which they will need Jaden Daniels to throw the ball more often, and we'll see his numbers start to inflate back up to where they've been all season. So if you have a chance to buy Jaden Daniels, this is probably your lone opportunity to at this point. And I say that because to me, of all the quarterbacks you can buy, he has the best chance of consistently staying in the top 10 rest of season. Baker Mayfield is a good buy candidate, as I've already talked about in the buy or buy segment. Kirk Cousins is a good buy candidate too, because he has another great playoff schedule that is very appealing. He's had a lot of up and down games, and he's got a tough matchup against Denver and a bye week, so you'd have to keep him on the bench for a while. But his playoff schedule is the Raiders, the Giants, and the Washington Commanders, which the Commanders are getting a little better, but those other two, Vegas and the Giants, is pretty nice. So Kirk Cousins is definitely in the buy candidates among the deep leagues where you can stash him on the bench and potentially put him in the playoffs. And then I want to bring up Jared Goff too. 5 interception game. People could be really down on him after this, but he gets the Jacksonville Jaguars next week. So great opportunity for Jared Goff to turn things around. I'm not personally concerned about this game affecting his long-term value. I think he's a solid streaming option the rest of the season. You just got to throw this away because he's been excellent on the season aside from this one game. The sell candidates. So Patrick Mahomes, I think this is a good time to try to sell him again. He's had some good games where he's been in the top 10 the past 2 weeks. So because of that, I think that's an opportunity to try to sell him because of his name value. And they have some matchups coming up on the schedule that they should win and not need to rely on Mahomes, like the Carolina Panthers, Vegas, the Browns. So this all sets up as an opportunity for him to be a great streaming or a great trade candidate. Another trade candidate is Brock Purdy, who's been very reliable in fantasy. And I would not be opposed to holding him. But what I'm saying is that he has a very difficult strength of schedule remaining this season. I believe it's in the bottom 5 among quarterbacks. So if you could trade Purdy for somebody that is going to have a great playoff schedule, somebody that has the rushing value that could bring them into the top 10, like a Jaden Daniels, I think it'd be difficult to do that with Purdy unless you're giving up a significant bench or running back or wide receiver piece too. But I think it would be reasonable to try to trade Purdy for a Justin Herbert, and that could be a good deal for you. And then Jordan Love is a sell candidate too, just off the fact that a lot of his points have been dependent on touchdowns this season. And they've been skewed more towards the passing game than the running game. And as we get into these cold games in Lambeau, you're going to see more reliance upon Josh Jacobs potentially. I'll talk about him in a bit. Maybe less on Jordan Love. But at the same time, much like CJ Stroud, if you can't afford to buy Love for a cheap piece, I would recommend doing that too. It just really depends on what you're getting. So just keep that in mind with some of these quarterback trades as well as other positions, is that it really depends on the value that you're receiving in terms of whether or not you should make the deal. And comment any questions you have below about that, and I'm happy to help guide you through any questions you may have. All right, so next we will talk about running backs. So which running backs do you want to add from waivers this week? My number one add is Gus Edwards. So first of all, there were not a lot of great pickups this week because there were not a lot of injuries. But the one that I really do like, who I think could be a great sleeper rest of season, is Gus Edwards. 10 carries in his first game back. J.K. Dobbins has kind of slowed down and not been as efficient as the season's progressed. And as I've mentioned a lot, he has a great extensive injury history. So Gus Edwards, I think there's a real world to him becoming the lead back on this Chargers team that is very reliant on the run moving forward. So I would pick up Gus Edwards and just see what happens. He's also a little more involved in the passing game as well than J.K. Dobbins from this past game. So just take a look at this to see if he is out there. I think he would be a great pickup. And honestly, I don't think he would really cost you that much fab because he did not have a great statistical game, but he could be a very sneaky addition that could really help you moving forward the rest of the season. My number 2 ad, if he is out there, is Jonathan Brooks. Possibly going to get dropped in this bye week because he has not played, and owners that have him may not be willing to hold him this long. But keep an eye out to see if Jonathan Brooks is there. I would be trying to pick him up and hold him through his bye week because I think there's a real world where he could become a lead back on this Panthers team. We've seen the success of Hubbard, and whether Hubbard gets hurt or if Brooks just takes half of his carries, I think that he's the top drafted running back in this rookie class. So he could be very talented, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does well. And again, this edition is another one where you don't have to spend a lot of fab, and I wouldn't really be necessarily tied to him as somebody that you want to hold rest of season, but just add him as a cursory addition to just see what happens, because I'm very curious to see how this breakdown with Chuba Hubbard and him still work as the season progresses. And then really the rest of the names are just names that you kind of want to monitor and see what happens. My number 3 pickup, Audric Estime, the lead running back from the Broncos backfield this week. He got the most carries, didn't do much with it, only 5.3 total points in full PPR. But Audric Estime getting the majority of carries for this Broncos team. They had a tough matchup this week against Kansas City. Very interested in that. So all 3 of those guys, Edwards, Brooks, and Estime, are not going to cost that much this week, but I think that those 3 are the top additions clearly. And then some other names that you want to look at as well that I don't think have a ton of upside but are still interesting. Jaylen Warren as a pass-catching running back for the Steelers. He's not going to really get the full workload as long as Najee Harris is healthy, but he does add an interesting dimension that is appealing because the Steelers' difficult run defensive schedule rest of season, but getting Warren involved may actually be a better deal for him because he could be getting some of the pass catching work to make up for the run game not working very effectively in those tough matchups. Tajay Spears getting more involved as well, coming back from his injuries. Maybe they could start to phase him in more as the season progresses and start to, give Tony Pollard a little bit of a breather, for lack of better words, because they're trying to develop Spears as their future. And then Jeremy McNichols has been effective when he's been in there for Washington. And if Eckler gets injured, that is another great player to have. But really the best additions that you can make if you're an owner is to get the handcuffs. So I'm going to go through the top 15 running backs and the handcuffs that you must have. Because to me, if you have a top 15 running back, at this point in the season, you need to be rostering their handcuff so that you have yourself covered. Because to me, that is better than really just picking up any of these guys like Gus Edwards, Brooks, etc. Because the best success for your roster, if you were to lose your elite running back, is to just put his backup in. So Derrick Henry, number 1 running back. So you want to make sure you have Justice Hill. Then you have Alvin Kamara. Right now it's a mix between Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams. So probably I would recommend Jamal Williams or Taysom Hill even, but not a great handcuff there necessarily, but make sure you have the backup in New Orleans. Bijan Robinson, make sure you have Tyler Algier. Saquon Barkley, make sure you have Kenneth Gainwell, who is still widely rostered, so that is another great pickup for the Barkley managers. Gibbs and Montgomery, they kind of fall into their own tier because they're each other's handcuffs basically and do really well, so that don't necessarily apply to them. Chuba Hubbard, so make sure you have Jonathan Brooks if you have Chuba Hubbard. Breece Hall, make sure you have Braylon Allen. I've been talking about him a lot. He is also widely available out there, and he's one of those guys that if you roster him, he could be a flex appeal even, but then if anything happens to Hall, he is just a potential lottery ticket that could win you your league. So check if he is out there first. That's probably a higher priority over Gus Edwards, to be honest, if he is out there. James Conner, make sure you have Trey Benson. For Kyron Williams, Corum would be next in line, but I'm not really tied to him as an elite option unless you own Kyron Williams, but I still would recommend owning Blake Corum. James Cook, make sure you have Ray Davis, who's already been effective. Joe Mixon, make sure that you have Dameon Pierce. I think that one's a little more, because you've also got Dario Gumbawale, but I would make sure that Mixon is covered either way. Devon Achane, make sure you own Raheem Mostert. Chase Brown, make sure you own Khalil Herbert. Christian McCaffrey, make sure that you have Jordan Mason. He may have been dropped now because he has had an injury, then a bye, and then didn't play that well this week. J.K. Dobbins, you got to make sure you get Gus Edwards, and then Aaron Jones, Cam Akers. So make sure that you have the handcuffs to these players, because this is the time of year where those are the most important positions that you need to ensure at your elite running backs. Who do you drop? Tanks Bigsby injured his ankle, has had a couple bad weeks in a row. You can safely drop him. Javonte Williams only had 1 carry this week. And this guy, I've been telling you all season that I'm not buying Javonte Williams stock at all. And, this is just another example of the inconsistency of this player. I'm totally out on Javonte Williams at this point. Justice Hill, unless you own Derrick Henry, I would not be rostering Justice Hill. And I think, obviously, if you can't get any buyers, drop him. But if you can't trade him to the Henry manager, that's probably the best thing you can do if you do have Hill without Henry. And then Raheem Mostert, kind of the same thing. Unless you have the ability to trade him to the Devon Achane manager, I would not be trying to roster him as my own manager. What do you do with Travis Etienne, who's been terrible this season? Extremely disappointing. 5.3 full PPR points. And then now he gets... he gets Detroit and then a bye week. I would not drop him. I think that if you have a winning record, I would be trying to buy him. I think if you have a losing record, or if you're around 500, I would be trying to sell him to a team that could probably use him. And because to me, if I was a team that was 8-2 or better, I would want to buy ETN. I could just give that guy a bench piece, which is equivalent to what ETN's value is right now on a terrible team. And I'm not optimistic that he's going to turn things around, because especially if they're going to go with Mac Jones the rest of the season, that spells bad news for the whole Jaguars offense. But at the same time, so much talent potential there. I would be willing to just stash my bench and see what happens if I have a winning record. So who else do you buy? There's 4 guys, and these are all players that I've kind of talked about as buy candidates already. But Breece Hall, James Conner, Christian McCaffrey, and Kyron Williams. So all 4 of those guys have had some down weeks. Christian McCaffrey's first game was not, anything spectacular, but they all have top 6 schedules rest of the way. And I think if there's any way that you could buy them, I would recommend trying to do that, because to me, all 4 of those guys are top 10 running backs rest of season. Yes, I know that Breece Hall has been disappointing. And yes, I know that Kyron Williams has had some down weeks these past 2 weeks. But they're all buy candidates to me. And I would recommend trying to get them as my top 4 running backs easily. And then 2 other guys kind of in that, if the first 4 are the A1 tier, this is the A2 tier. They're both, these are both great running backs to have. More of that running back 2 with running back 1 upside. Jonathan Taylor and Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs has been a victim of game script over these past couple weeks with a lot of touchdowns, and then particularly in that Detroit game, they fell behind early and they didn't need to use him, but he looked great in the carries he got. Lambeau is going to be cold, and they're going to rely on the run, so I would recommend trying to buy Josh Jacobs. And then Jonathan Taylor has been good this season, but he has unfortunately not gotten a lot of great touchdown opportunities. They've had some quarterback turmoil, but he has a nice schedule rest of the way, number 9 going forward. I already talked about Tyrone Tracy, a great buy candidate. And then among the C-tier guys, I would still be trying to buy Rico Dowdle. I know that they've got a tough situation in Dallas, but he is the best running back there. And, if they do move to Lance, and even with Cooper Rush, I suspect them to utilize more of the short game, which could work well to Dowdle's advantage. And that I think if you could trade a piece let's say that you have Justice Hill and the Derrick Henry manager needs his handcuff, I think that you can make that deal to get Rico Dowdle for the handcuff that you have. I think that is a fair offer to make. And then I put Alexander Madison in a category like that as well, because to me, Madison is the best back in Vegas and probably on waivers because of their bye week this past week. So just keep an eye out for those two guys as volume plays on bad teams that should still give you a decent fantasy floor week to week. Sell candidates. So bear with me on this one, but Derrick Henry has the second hardest schedule rest of season. And I say this because if you could flip Derrick Henry to get a Christian McCaffrey, I would probably do that based on the schedules. So you got to get elite return if you're going to sell Derrick Henry. But I think especially in those dynasty league formats where, you're looking at Derrick Henry, he's aging, he's playing very well. But if this is the opportunity for you to get like a Breece Hall, a younger running back that is struggling right now, but just has such great longevity moving forward in his career, this may be the time to do that. So just consider that with Derrick Henry's schedule coming up, that it is challenging for them. But I don't think there's anything wrong with holding him too. And I'm not really worried about the schedule causing him fear for not starting him in the playoffs. But I'm just saying that, this could be the opportunity to sell him while he is the number one running back on the season. And those other factors I mentioned. J.K. Dobbins, a good sell candidate off his early season performances and kind of slipping over these past few weeks, plus a difficult schedule, number 24 in the NFL rest of season. Tony Pollard, I've already mentioned the Tajay Spears potential integration of the offense taking touches away, but they also have the 25th schedule moving forward in terms of strength of schedule. Najee Harris, hardest schedule. You're not really selling high on him, but I would be trying to sell. And then Chuba Hubbard. So yes, this is great. And Chuba Hubbard is a top 10 running back right now in fantasy. I don't see him finishing there. I see him finishing in the top 15 to 20 range. But I think if you could sell Chuba Hubbard, especially given the Jonathan Brooks variable that may eat into his targets and touches game to game, I would recommend trying to do that. So I think this is a good sell candidate if you can get great return. Wide receivers. So who do you want to pick up on waivers? The top ones I would look at if they're out there are Jawan Jennings and Xavier Legette. Jennings would be number one if he is there, 11 targets this week. They need guys to get involved in that offense. Now that Christian McCaffrey's back, it's going to open up more for Jennings. Check if he's out there. Great addition if he is. And then Xavier Legette, as I've talked about, number one wide receiver on the Panthers. Check if he is dropped, because I think there's a good chance he could be. He would be a great addition to your team as well. But the number one receiver I would get aside from those two is Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall, again, with the 49ers, they need a receiving option to emerge. Deebo Samuel has been inconsistent. Ayuk is out. Jennings is the best option, but Ricky Pearsall as a number one pick is very intriguing too. So just keep an eye out to see if he is there. I like him a lot. Again, not a great week for receivers because not a lot of injuries. There were some spectacular performances. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Tylan Wallace, both in the top 5, I believe, for this week. But honestly, I'm not interested in either of those guys because Valdes-Scantling, as he's done his entire career, he is totally dependent on big play touchdowns. And in this past game, 25.9 PPR points, incredible for him. And yes, you can make the argument that, they need a receiver to step up in that system because they've had so many injuries. But 3 for 109 and 2 touchdowns off 3 targets is not sustainable week to week. I'm sorry, it's not sustainable. So, they get Cleveland this week, and as I would probably recommend, this is a great week to sell Marquez Valdes-Scantling if you can pick him up and try to trade him. But I would not be trying to pick him up as somebody that I would hold rest of season. And then Wallace, much the same thing. Didn't get a lot of targets. Big broken play that led to his touchdown. Adonai Mitchell is interesting to me with the Colts. He got 6 targets. Young receiver that's talented. I would definitely be interested in him as an option moving forward. But a little bit concerned just because Pittman will come back, what he will look like. So I'm not, again, none of these receivers this week as pickups, I would be putting a lot of fab on unless Jennings or Legette are out there. But Mitchell getting more involved, so just keep an eye out for that. Mac Hollins has had 2 double-digit points in the past 2 weeks. He's widely available. So just consider if Amari Cooper is going to continue to miss time that he could be a sneaky play. Alec Pierce, I think, could be thrown out there as well. He's had up and down performances all season, but again, especially to a DFS dart throw play, he could be a great option for you as well. But much like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, very dependent on big plays. Devon Vele is another interesting option. And I think really looking at the guys that interest me the most, Pearsall would be one. So we'll include Jennings and Legette. Jennings 1, Legette 2, Pearsall 3, and then Vele 4. Devon Vele has started to stand out as the number 2 receiver on the Broncos. He got a touchdown this week, 4 targets. I believe he had 81 yards. Double check that real quick. 39. Okay, that was kind of off. Somebody was 4 for 81. I'll find it eventually. But Devon Vele is interesting to me because they do need a second receiver on that team. And I think he's starting to get the fast lane on that track to be that guy for them. John Mechie, another good game too. But with Nico Collins coming back soon, I think Mechie's time of success could be short-lived. But again, another talented receiver that I think I would want to keep an eye on. Who do you drop? So this player I've mentioned would probably be a good drop candidate because of the trade that he went to Baltimore. And Diontae Johnson, I think at this point is droppable if you have a losing record and you're in a shallow league. 1 for 6 this past game. Didn't catch a ball. It's first game with the Ravens. This is just becoming a mess for this Ravens offense in terms of the pass catchers. It's going to get split around. Diontae Johnson is the 3rd to 4th wide receiving option. I would be cutting him in redraft leagues if you have a team that needs to get some W's over these next few weeks to lock up a playoff berth. Xavier Worthy, much the same situation with the addition of Hopkins. It's really made him irrelevant in terms of his volume in the pass game. You can get a fluke touchdown from time to time with him, but I think that he's not reliable as somebody that you want to start, so he's somebody that could be dropped. And then Jordan Addison, kind of the same story. He's had some good games time to time, but not very reliable. And I think that he's somebody that I would be comfortable moving on from. Jaylen Waddle started off poorly, but he did actually get 6 targets, and he led the Dolphins in targets this game. So he kind of falls off that list a little bit for me. But if you're I just bring him up because if you've drafted him highly, you're struggling, you need to get some wins, you have a losing record. I think if there's some of these guys out there like Jennings, Legette, Pearsall, I would be willing to drop Waddle for them. And then DJ Moore, I would only drop DJ Moore if you're in a shallow league and Jennings is out there. You can replace Moore with Jennings. But I would be trying to keep DJ Moore because they have a great rest of season. So no, things are rough right now, but just keep in mind that there's a good potential that things could turn around for DJ Moore. So I would not be panic dropping him. I would not be trying to drop Ladd McConkey or Brian Thomas Jr. Those are both rookies that, the rookies have up and down performances time to time, but they've been the leading receiver on their teams. I'd be benching them right now because the quarterback play has not been great, but they're both players I would not be dropping. Who do you buy? So this is potentially controversial, but there's an argument to buy Ceedee Lamb. Obviously, the quarterback situation sucks for them right now. It's really tanked his value. I do not like him as somebody that finishes within the top 15 rest of season. I'll go over my rankings more as we progress to the trade video. But Ceedee Lamb has a very difficult strength of schedule remaining that is really going to hurt his value. No. Okay, disregard what I just said. Ceedee Lamb has a top 10 strength of schedule. He had 10 targets this week. So despite how bad the quarterback play has been with Ceedee Lamb, there is a great argument to be made that he can still be relevant and still be a wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 3. So if somebody is panicking, this could be a good chance to buy him. There's also an argument to sell him, which I will talk about in a little bit. But much like this argument with Lamb that I've talked about, there's a great argument to buy Davante Adams for the same reason. 13 targets this past week. And yes, he didn't do much with them, but 13 targets is 13 targets. That's somebody that is heavily involved in an offense and going to have better games moving forward. I think Arizona's defense, we have to regard them now as a good defense. And the Jets, they're going to rely on Davante Adams because of that Rodgers-Adams connection. I'm not really too worried about him. My expectations are just kind of down on this whole team in general, but Adams is somebody I'd be buying. Other guys that I think are great buy candidates, Jaden Reed has had some down weeks, but still to me the best wide receiver on the Packers. Jacoby Myers is a great buy candidate because he is the top wide receiver on that team. Him and Brock Bowers are going to be the two leading receivers. And because this team is going to be losing quite often, may not win a game the rest of the season, it's going to mean a lot of opportunity for Myers to catch a lot of passes. Josh Downs has not had some great performances the past 2 games, but the targets speak for themselves. The last 5 weeks, he's had 9, 3, which was kind of a fluke, and then 9, 9, and 10 the past 3 weeks. So out of the past 5 weeks, 4 of them have been 9 or more targets. So Josh Downs is a great buy candidate among those B-tier receivers. You're getting even deeper. I would recommend trying to buy Cedric Tillman coming off of this bye week against New Orleans. Just lost Marcus Lattimore. Should be an opportunity for him to get involved again. And he's had some amazing games these past 3 weeks. People may be forgetting about him, and it's a good time to buy because this could be a great receiver to have rest of the season for you. And then Ladd McConkey, I would be buying him despite his poor performance because he's got the number 8 strength of schedule. This Chargers team, as I already mentioned, they're going to have some tougher games where they're going to need to throw the ball more, and I suspect that McConkey will get more involved. All right. And then Legette is another good buy candidate because he has the number 6 strength of schedule. And I will go over more of the strength of schedule later, but just consider the teams with the best strength of schedule at wide receiver: Pittsburgh, the Giants, the Bears, the Titans, and the Philadelphia Eagles. So great if you have Pickens, Calvin Ridley, etc. So we will talk more strength of schedule later this week, but just keep that in mind for your buy candidates. Sell candidates. This is another one that just bear with me for a sec. Jamar Chase had 55 fantasy points, and that is incredible. He's, to me, there's a great argument that he's the number 1 wide receiver rest of season. And just on the short list, it's either going to be him or Jefferson for me. That's going to be number 1. I make the full list as the week develops. But I think if there's a chance that if somebody is going to give you like Justin Jefferson and an elite running back for Chase, maybe a smart choice to do that. Like, let's say that, somebody is willing to give you Justin Jefferson and Breece Hall for Jamar Chase. I would probably make that trade because you're getting a guy that is a RB1 and a wide receiver 1 in place of a wide receiver 1. So it builds your depth, and you're taking advantage of Chase at his elite value. But I think other than that, there's not a lot of reason why I would trade Chase other than the fact that he has the second hardest strength of schedule at wide receiver. So this could be a time to capitalize, but to me, Chase is just so good. Unless you're getting elite return, I would not be worried about this strength of schedule moving forward. And then the CeeDee Lamb argument to sell him is that the quarterback play has been bad. There's not a lot of depth of target. He's getting receptions, but not getting a lot of yards. He's already had up and down performances already, even with Dak. So there is a great argument to sell him. And I think if you have a losing record, I would be looking to try to sell Lamb and see what you get. But again, this is really dependent on what the trade is. I think depending on what the offers are, it's a good argument to be made to sell him or to keep him. So if you have any questions, send them my way. Cooper Kupp, to me, is a good sell candidate off the fact that they have, 1, a difficult strength of schedule, but 2, this is Puka Nakua's offense. He has emerged as the top receiver when both of them have played. And Kupp had that amazing week 1 when Nakua went out early, and then that game against Seattle where he also had ton of receptions when Puka was out. So just consider that with Kupp, that his numbers are a little bit inflated off of games where Puka Nacua has not played. Zay Flowers, I'd be trying to sell off the fact that, this Ravens offense has had, is going to have unpredictability now they're integrating Diontae Johnson, etc. And Flowers has had a little bit of a down game this past week, but I think there's a world where you can get a pretty consistent receiver in his place. Hopkins is a potential sell candidate from the Chiefs because they have a difficult strength of schedule. But to me, he's in that Rashee Rice role now. I would not be actively looking to trade him unless you get some great return for him. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, great trade candidate if he's out there because he did not see this performance being sustainable for him. Also consider guys like Khalil Shakir. He's currently in the top 20, but I don't see him staying there as somebody that you could flip for somebody with more long-term value. Tight ends. So another tough week for tight ends to pick from, but check if Dalton Schultz is out there. I think there's a good chance that he gets involved again and gives you a consistent floor. He had 9.6 points in full PPR this past week. Mike Gesicki, if he is out there and T. Higgins misses another game, I would be willing to go back to him again. Despite the modest performance, he did have 7 targets. I think there's a good chance that he continues to stay involved. So probably the best option out there. The number 2 option for me would be Jonnu Smith, who's involved in this Miami offense. Gives you a safe floor. If you're trying to hit a home run, you could go for Taysom Hill, but I don't love Hill because he's either all or nothing with him. But just consider with Taysom Hill, they don't have a lot of great receiving options on that team, aside from Kamara and I guess Valdes-Scantling, but I'm not convinced, as I've already said. He also had an 80-yard touchdown that was wiped away by penalty this past week. So Taysom Hill, there's a world where he should be involved, but we've been fooled by this guy so many times that I would not be willing to play that game personally. Freiermuth had a solid game, and so did Tanner Hudson from this past week. But I'm not really interested in either of them because Freiermuth was only 3 for 13 and a touchdown. And then Tanner Hudson, although he had volume, I feel like the Bengals have like 3 or 4 tight ends that they just continually rotate in and out. They get volume. But I would feel more confident that Gesicki gets more of that this upcoming game than Tanner Hudson. I would not be chasing one game versus a couple consistent performances that we've seen from Gesicki throughout his career. Who are the drop candidates? Hunter Henry and Cole Kmet are drop candidates. And then in the deeper leagues, Dalton Kincaid is a drop, although I don't love dropping him. Knee injury, then he gets Kansas City in a bye. I think this was just a tough season for Kincaid, and if you haven't already moved on, I would strongly recommend doing so. Would not drop Ferguson or Evan Ingram because those guys, although they had bad games, they are getting targets, and there's not a lot of other receiving options. Evan Ingram, especially to me, would be a buy among the tight ends. He got 8 targets, which led the Jaguars, and it seems like Mac Jones, because of his limitations, is going to rely on the tight ends. So I would personally be trying to buy into that as somebody that might need a tight end. Evan Ingram could be a good buy low option for you. And then based on strength of schedule, there's 3 good tight end options to buy. Also getting great target volume. Cade Otton, number 4 strength of schedule. David Njoku, number 7 strength of schedule. And then the biggest name, which I've already talked about several times, is Brock Bowers, who has the number 3 strength of schedule. So if you're going to potentially buy Bowers, you got to do that this week. I think that's your last opportunity to. Your sell candidates, Mark Andrews has played well the last few weeks. So I think there's a real world where you could keep him, but just keep in mind he has the hardest strength of schedule remaining, and we've already seen some dud performances by him. I'd be trying to sell him if I can before he has another dud game, which is also going to be an effect of Diontae Johnson being integrated, etc. Sell Mark Andrews. And then Zach Ertz is another sell candidate off the strength of schedule. Not barely on the fringe of rostering in shallow leagues, but in deep leagues, I think this is a good move to flip him for a tight end like Ferguson. I would recommend trying to do that. And Laporta, solid game this week, but dealt with an injury. And now we've already seen Laporta have games in which he was not targeted very often. I'd be trying to sell him for a more volume-dependent tight end moving forward. Who are the defensive matchups for this week that I would be interested in? So the best option to me that was out there is Detroit. May have been dropped because of the Texans matchup this week, but they get Jacksonville this upcoming week with Mac Jones, which is about as good of a stream as you can get. Green Bay gets Chicago, which is struggling. That would be another great one. Houston against Dallas and potentially Trey Lance, who I think he had 5 interceptions in a preseason game or something crazy. And then New Orleans gets Cleveland and Jameis Winston, who Jameis yielded the number 1 performing defense against him the last game he played. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to try the New Orleans Saints and see if he does it again. Longer term plays. So Arizona, I would really be interested in them if they are dropped because they have the number 3 strength of schedule rest of season. And a lot of teams may not be wanting to hold them through their bye week, but Arizona is a great defensive stream based on their schedule remaining. So keep an eye if they're out there. They've been playing well the last few weeks. They added Browning from the Denver Broncos, and their schedule in the playoffs, they've gotten the New England Patriots in week 15, great matchup. Carolina Panthers in week 16. Then a little bit harder in the championship against the Los Angeles Rams. But still, I think this is a good schedule moving forward. And then they also got Geno Smith twice in the regular season, which we've seen him make horrendous mistakes that lead to pick sixes. So this is all just sets up well for Arizona to be a great defense to hold through the season. And then another great one is Houston, who has number 7 remaining strength of schedule, and their matchups look like the following. They have Miami in week 15, not as appealing as it was a couple weeks ago, and then Kansas City and Baltimore. So their playoff schedule is kind of tough, but in between they've got Dallas, Tennessee, and Jacksonville from week 11 to 13. So if you're looking for a 3-week hold before their bye week in week 14, consider the Texans as a great option for you. The best playoff schedules are Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Miami, and Green Bay. So the one that stands out for me among that group is Green Bay. But also consider that Buffalo has the number 9 fantasy strength of schedule, and then the Chargers have the number 10. And those are both good defenses that Buffalo is probably going to get dropped in some places because they play Kansas City this week. And then the Chargers get the Bengals. So those 2 teams may be dropped, but they could be good holds through the playoff schedule too. There's 2 kickers that really stand out to me for this week that I'd be trying to get. Only 29% roster. Jason Sanders gets Las Vegas this next week. That's a great option. And then Cameron Dicker, who's been a solid kicker throughout the season, he gets Cincinnati. So I think that both of them are great matchups, and they're in domes, which I've already talked about. Dome kickers are the best for this time of year when the weather is inclement. All right, so that's all that I've got for this video today. We will have a trade video where I look more in depth at the trade candidates that you want to buy and sell before the trade deadlines in your league. So check that out. Should be coming out on Wednesday. So take a look for that. And if you have any questions, as always, comment below and I will answer them and help you win a fantasy football championship this season. All right, well, that's all I've got. See you guys next time.